Africa did not begin with chains. Before the Atlantic Ocean carried ships fouled with human suffering, before names were erased and families torn apart, Africa already stood as one of the most dynamic and connected continents on Earth. The story of how Africans were captured and sold cannot be understood without first understanding what existed before the capture. Africa was not empty. Africa was not backward. Africa was not waiting to be discovered. For centuries, Africa was a center of wealth, learning, power, and global trade. Across West Africa, great empires rose and governed vast territories with structured systems of leadership. The empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai controlled trade routes that stretched across the Sahara Desert, linking Africa to North Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. Gold flowed north, salt flowed south. Ideas traveled with them. The Mali Empire, one of the richest empires in world history, reached its height in the 13th and 14th centuries. Its rulers protected trade routes, collected taxes, and maintained order across thousands of miles. Wealth was not hidden. It was organized and managed. Cities such as Timbuktu, Gao, and Jenne became global centers of knowledge. Timbuktu, often dismissed centuries later as a myth, was home to libraries containing thousands of handwritten manuscripts. These texts covered mathematics, medicine, astronomy, law, and philosophy. Scholars traveled from across Africa and beyond to study there. Knowledge was power, and Africa possessed it. Further south, forest kingdoms like Benin developed highly organized political systems. The Kingdom of Benin was governed by the Oba, supported by councils of chiefs. Benin City was carefully planned, with wide streets, defensive walls, and a royal palace that impressed early European visitors. Benin artisans produced bronze and brass artworks using advanced techniques that required skill and scientific understanding. These artworks recorded history, honored leaders, and carried spiritual meaning. In Central Africa, the Kingdom of Kongo governed through provinces led by appointed officials. Agriculture, fishing, and trade supported strong local economies. Markets were organized, and long-distance trade connected inland communities to the Atlantic coast. Along the eastern coast, Swahili city-states such as Kilwa, Mombasa, and Zanzibar flourished. These cities were deeply connected to the Indian Ocean trade network, linking Africa to Arabia, Persia, India, and China. Stone buildings, ports, and ships reflected centuries of maritime experience. The Swahili people were African, global,
spirits of the
and
ancestors,
culturally
hear our
sophisticated.
call.
In the Horn of
Bless this
Africa,
fire, God.
Ethiopia stood as one of the world's oldest continuous civilizations. With written records, a strong monarchy, and a unique cultural identity, Ethiopia engaged with the wider world while maintaining its independence. Across Africa, societies were structured around family, clan, and community responsibility. Leadership was earned and respected. Elders governed through wisdom. Councils resolved disputes. Justice aimed to restore harmony, not destroy lives. Even systems of servitude, where they existed, were not based on race and were not permanent in the way Atlantic slavery later became. Enslaved individuals could marry, own property, and eventually gain freedom. Their children were not automatically enslaved. This matters because history was later rewritten to suggest Africans had always sold their own people in the same way Europeans did. That is false. Trade within Africa was vibrant. Caravans crossed deserts. Rivers served as highways. Markets thrived. In many regions, women dominated trade, controlling prices and supply networks. African economies were productive. Farmers adapted crops to local climates. Iron workers produced tools and weapons. Weavers, potters, and craftsmen supported both local life and regional trade. Spiritual life guided daily existence. Africans practiced belief systems centered on ancestors, morality, and connection to nature. Religion shaped leadership, law, and social responsibility. History was preserved through oral tradition. Griots carried centuries of memory through storytelling, ensuring knowledge survived without written records. When Europeans arrived on African coasts in the 15th century, they did not arrive as conquerors. They arrived as traders. African rulers controlled access to land and commerce. Europeans depended on African knowledge to survive. Early trade focused on gold, ivory, and goods. Africans set the terms. But across the Atlantic, European colonies were expanding. Plantations demanded labor. Indigenous populations were collapsing under disease and exploitation. Slowly, the focus of trade began to shift. Human beings became the commodity. This change was not inevitable. It was driven by profit and power. And this is where the story turns.